Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah, and I work in the education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and I'm so glad you're joining us today because today we're going to do some drawing. So you have joined us for our Draw With Us program, and there's a little hint of what we're going to draw behind me. Can you take a guess? That's right, we're going to draw some jellies today. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about these animals, learn a little bit about what these animals are, what they can do, maybe what they eat, how they move, and then we're going to practice our drawing skills, and we're going to draw a couple different types of jellies. Now, while we're exploring today, if you want to share any observations that you have, if you have any questions about the animals we're talking about, we would love to hear from you. So I am not alone here in the studio. I have Cynthia, who is controlling everything you see behind me, and she's going to be taking all those questions and observations. And she just put a number up on the screen, and that number is 562-286-1838. And you can go ahead and text us any questions, observations, and at the end, we would love to see your drawings. If you practice drawing along with us, we would love to see those drawings, and you can send them right to this text line. Now, if you're watching this program live, so it's Wednesday morning, November 3rd, you can go ahead and text us. But if you're watching after the fact when we're not live anymore, we still would love to hear from you and to see your drawings. But we do ask that you email us, and the email address is just below the phone number. It's live@lbaop.org, and we'll be able to talk to you through that email rather than the live text line. All right, everyone, are you ready to start exploring? So I'm going to step off the screen for just a moment, and we're going to start making some observations, and this is a great time if you want to draw along with us to make sure you have your supplies ready. Now, you can really use any kind of drawing supplies you have. I'm going to be using a whiteboard and some whiteboard markers, and if you have a whiteboard, go for it. But you can also use any kind of paper if you have scratch paper or blank paper, even lined paper, and then any drawing tools, pencil, color pencils, crayons, markers, pens, whatever you have available, you are more than welcome to use. And we are going to draw a couple different types of jellies. Now, what we're looking at here, these are called Pacific Sea Nettles. And we'll come back and we'll end up drawing these a little bit later. But let's just take a couple moments to make some observations about jellies. So what do you notice about these animals? Because these animals are really fascinating. They're both very, very simple and very complex animals at the same time, which sounds kind of silly to be both complicated and simple, or complex and simple, but these animals definitely fit that description. So let's make some observations maybe about how they move. What do you notice on their body? And remember, you can go ahead and text us in those observations. Now, what I notice is they don't move super, super fast. They're just kind of, we like to say, drifting. They just kind of drift around, moving wherever the water takes them. Now, jellies, they are an invertebrate. Now, that's a big word, but that word invertebrate just means they have no backbone. Now, if you take your hands and you reach behind you and you feel your back, right in the middle, you might feel all those bumps. That's your backbone. That's your spine. So we are vertebrates. Animals with a backbone are vertebrates. But animals like jellies, they are called invertebrates because putting that word in in front of it means no. So they have no backbone or no bones. So nothing hard in their body because they have no bones. And then another way we can classify these animals is we call them plankton. Now, have you heard that word plankton before? If you watch SpongeBob, you might think of that little evil creature, plankton. But plankton is actually a living thing in the ocean, and there's a bunch of different types of plankton. But jellies, they fall into that category of plankton. Now think about, a lot of times when you imagine plankton in your mind, you might think about really tiny animals. Maybe you need a microscope to see them. But the real definition of plankton means a drifter or a wanderer, which, again, perfectly describes these animals. So jellies, they are actually a type of plankton because they drift through the water. They aren't strong enough or they don't have the ability to swim against a current. So if you think about looking at the beach and there's waves, right? Those waves are moving in the water and the ocean currents move things in the water. Jellies, they can't swim in the opposite direction of a current. So if the waves are going this way, a jelly can't swim this way. Now, if you're in the water, we've got our arms we can use to push ourselves and our legs we can use to swim, and we've got a lot of muscle. So if the waves are going this way, we can swim this way. But a jelly, they don't have those same kind of muscle structures. And so if the waves are going this way, the jelly's going that way. The waves are going this way, the jellies going that same way. So they just drift or wander wherever the water pushes them because they don't have the ability to swim against that current. So plankton doesn't necessarily mean tiny animals, although the large majority of plankton are really tiny. But plankton just means an animal that drifts or wanders through the ocean that's not strong enough to swim against an ocean current. And so jellies, from tiny little jellies to the largest jelly in the ocean, which is the lion's mane jellyfish, which can grow up to 100 feet long. You heard that right. Take a moment to process. A jelly, an animal like this, that is 100 feet long. That's about the length of a blue whale. Or if you think about school buses, 3 school buses end to end. The lion's mane can get that long. But even at 100 feet long, it's just going to drift through the water because it can't swim against a current. So jellies, they are invertebrates, animals with no bones. They are plankton or planktonic animals, so they're drifters. Now, what's interesting is even though they can't swim against the current, we can see they are moving, right? They do have mobility. So those are kind of different things. They have mobility, they can move their body, but they aren't strong enough to move against a current. Let's take a look at some other jellies. Maybe some moon jellies if we have available. Aha! Take a look at these. So these are one of the common jellies that we have here along our coast. We also have them here at the aquarium. And they have this big round part on their body, that top part. That is called their bell. And that bell can pulse. So you can kind of move your hands like this, like a jelly moving. So while they aren't able to swim in any direction, they can pulse and move their bell. And that helps move water over their body, which allows them to do a lot of important things like breathing or collecting food. And so they do have that mobility, even though they're not strong enough to swim against a current. Now, these moon jellies, like I said, these are ones we have here. And we actually have a moon jelly touch lab. So you can actually touch these jellies here at the aquarium. Now, think about what might be a challenge to touching a jellyfish in general. What do they do to protect themselves? That's right. They sting. So jellies can sting to protect themselves, but you don't have to worry about the moon jelly stinging because even though they do have stinging cells, they're super teeny tiny and our skin is so thick that we are safe to touch these ones without getting hurt. Now that's not true for all jellies, so we like to warn against touching jellies, but our moon jellies, when you're here in a safe environment, they are very safe to touch. Now we're going to start off by drawing our moon jelly, but one more thing I want to talk about jellies. Ooh, here's a good picture. Ooh, a video. So one more thing I want to point out is things that jellies don't have. So we mentioned they don't have a backbone, but there's also some other interesting things that jellies don't have on their body. They don't have a brain, and they don't have a heart. So they're brainless, spineless, and heartless animals, which sounds sort of shocking to some people because when we learn about what it means to be alive or to be an animal, we learn there's certain things you need in order to survive. And having a brain and a heart to pump blood through your body and bones are some of those things. But the jellies, they manage to survive by breathing, eating, and releasing that waste, and reproducing. And then that's all they really need to do. So they're really simple in that sense of they don't have a lot of things to them, but that's pretty complicated to think about how you can survive without these sort of basic things we think we need. All right, so we're going to start off by drawing a moon jelly. Now, there's a couple ways we can draw it. I'm going to draw one from the side, but you can also look and draw one from above, like this one here. But I'm going to draw it sort of from the side, but right side up. So, take a look, maybe 30 more seconds of these moon jellies, and then we'll head to my document camera so we can start drawing. And we'll kind of go back and forth so we can make sure we can include all the things that make a jelly a jelly. So what do you notice? Now, they do have that round body, so that's something we want to keep in mind, and that's something we'll see with almost all jellies, is they've got this sort of this round body. It's called their bell. Interesting. All right, let's go over to my document camera, and I'm going to start drawing. So like I said, I'm going to draw the moon jelly from the side to start. And so they had that round body, but because I'm drawing it from the side, I'm going to basically draw a half circle. So I'm going to kind of make a half circle, and they're not necessarily a perfect circle, so maybe a little kind of wavy. And then they've got this line at the bottom. So I'm going to start it off straight. But if we go back to that video of the moon jellies for a moment, and we watch them, you'll notice like right over here, just went off the screen, right over here, oop, too far, or right here, that it's not necessarily straight across. Ooh, right here is a good image of it. All right, you can press play. So you can see that on that bottom line right here, you can see they're not necessarily straight across. They've sort of got little, almost like petals. So we're going to make sure to include those. So I'm going to go back to my document camera. And I'm going to erase this bottom line. You could also draw over it if you don't have an eraser easy. And I'm going to kind of make a little wavy. Just like that. So that we've added in that sort of wavy part of the moon jelly's bell. And then this whole part is the bell. All right, let's go back to our video real quick. So we can see what other things we need to add in. Ooh, look at this design right here on top. So they all almost look like they have a flower on top. And that is a very important part of the jelly because that's actually their stomach pouches. Ooh, Cynthia's going to bring up a better picture of those stomach pouches. Now, when we look at it, see if you can see how many of those sort of more petals or little circles there are. Because it might surprise you. Think about us. We have one stomach. Oh, here's a good, excellent picture. Take a look. We got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then back here you can see 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's right. They have 4 stomachs. Now think about what you could eat if you had 4 stomachs. I like to think I'd have 1 stomach for breakfast. That'd be a big one because I love breakfast foods. 1 stomach for lunch, 1 for dinner, and the 4th one, ice cream. Just a stomach for ice cream. So that every day I could have ice cream, I could fill it up in that stomach. Is that what you would use with your 4 stomachs? Think about what would you eat if you had 4 stomachs? And let us know. But our jellies, they have 4 stomachs that they're going to fill up with their food. Oh, and you can always text us. So those 4 stomachs, they're going to fill with food. And they kind of look like a flower. Now, when you come here and visit, you might notice some jellies have more or less stomachs. And we've seen anywhere between 2 and 8 stomachs. Oh my goodness, think about all the things you could eat if you had 8 stomachs. Have a lot of things to figure out. But they have between 2 and 8. Now, they should have 4, as most of the ones we see here. But some have this genetic variation and they end up with more or less stomachs. So we want to make sure we include the stomachs. And then, look at these sort of ribbony things coming down from these jellies. They're really pretty. Now, a lot of times when guests are touching, they think those are going to be the stinging cells of our jellies. But that's not where they're stinging. We'll include our stinging cells. But for these jellies, those long ribbony things in the middle are called the oral arms. And what that means is that's where they're going to grab food and bring it up to those stomachs. And so there's 1 oral arm for each stomach pouch. So we're going to make sure we include those stomachs and include those oral arms. So let's head back to our drawing. Now, because we're looking at the side view, I'm not going to draw all 4 stomachs. But if you decided to draw yours from looking above and you made a big circle, you can make sure to add 4 or even more stomachs. Like I said, we've seen up to 8. So I'm going to draw just 2 because I'm kind of looking from the side. So we've got 1 and 2. So those are my 2 stomach pouches right there. And then we have to do those oral arms. So we want to make sure that our jelly can catch its food or collect its food. And so they had those sort of ribbony oral arms. So I'm going to make mine right here. And I'm just going to kind of draw these little squiggles connected. And they can kind of drift in any direction because like we said, these are ocean drifters. And so the water current might be pushing their oral arms in all different directions. There's 2. I'm going to draw 4 because even though we can only see 2 stomachs, they still have those 4 oral arms. Now for some jellies, those oral arms are kind of small or short. And then some jellies, they can be really long. It just depends on the species. So you can make yours any length you want. So those are my oral arms of my jelly. So that's how they're going to bring food all the way up into their stomach. Now, how do jellies catch their food? Now, it has to do with how they protect themselves too, right? How do they protect themselves? That's right, they sting. And that's also how they catch their food because they're going to sting their food. Now, what they have, their stingers are going to be around the outside of their bell. So in the middle, those are their oral arms, but the stinging cells are going to be right along the side. Now, for our moon jellies, they're really hard to see. They're kind of, you can see them right here. They're really fine. They almost look like little hairs. Now, for some jellies are a lot thicker, and we'll see that on the Pacific Sea Nettle when we go to that one next. But for the moon jelly, they're like really fine hairs that line the outside of the bell, and they're not very long. So we can go back to our jelly and add all those little stinging cells. So nice fine little hairs, and they go all around the bell. And what happens is as the jelly is drifting around and they're maybe looking for some food, that food is going to drift right through those stinging cells because their food is also a type of plankton. So plankton eating another type of plankton. So our jellies, our moon jellies here, we feed them brine shrimp, which are tiny little teeny tiny shrimp. And those shrimp are just going to float through the water, and they're going to get stung by those stinging tentacles, tentacles. And then the oral arms are going to collect all those little brine shrimp, and they're going to send it up to the stomachs. And so we can also add, they've got all these lines going down their body that are going to help with bringing those food up to their stomachs. And it's going to help them move water around their body, give them a little texture. There is our moon jelly. All right, let's take a look at those moon jellies one more time, see how it compares, how we did. Excellent. Now, this picture is really cool because this shows us moon jellies, but it also shows us baby jellies. Take a look. That's a baby jelly. Now, jellyfish have a really interesting life cycle. We won't spend too much time, but this is one of those parts of the jellies that get really complicated. So they're plankton, right? They're drifters, but jellies actually start their life attached to a surface. So the really quick overview of a jelly life cycle is jellies lay eggs, the eggs hatch, and then those little teeny tiny newly hatched jellies attach to a surface. So it could be a rock, it could be a pier, like if they're along the coast. Any hard surface they can find, they're going to attach. And then they're going to grow attached. So not drifting like we see them, they're going to grow attached, and they're going to grow and grow and grow. And then there's little branches of jellies that pop off. And when they pop off of that branch, they look like this. But does this look like the jellies we're looking at now? No, it looks really different. And so these jellies, when we see them swimming, they look like they're working really hard because they're pumping their body and they're moving around and they're collecting food and eating. And as they grow, all those kind of individual parts blend together and we get the jelly we see here. So they have all these different life stages where they look really different, they maybe act really different, and we end up with our jellies like we see here. Pretty interesting. If you have more questions about that, go ahead and text us. But we're going to move on to draw our second jelly. So we're going to draw a Pacific Sea Nettle, which is another local jelly species that we have here along our coast. It's a bit bigger jelly, and it's not one that we would touch if you were coming to the aquarium or you saw out in the open ocean, because their sting is a little bit stronger. Now their sting, often it will feel like a burn. So it's not like electricity, but it's going to feel kind of like a burn or a rash, like if you were to touch fire, which we don't want to do any of those things. But take a look at these jellies. So the basic anatomy, the basic parts of its body are going to be the same as that moon jelly. But if you notice, they're bigger. They're more colorful. Do you notice anything else? I noticed that they have much longer stinging tentacles, so those ones that are along the outside of their body. And their oral arms are super long and fluffy looking as well. Something else to notice is you can't really see their stomachs. So they still have 4 stomachs, but not all jellies like to display and show off their stomachs the way that the moon jellies do. Ooh, here's a good view. Take a look at this nettle. It's a camera hog right here. But you can see those long red stinging tentacles. They're much thicker and much longer than we saw in the moon jelly. And then there's oral arms and that big bell. Ooh, kind of cool. Over here. I was going to say, if you look at these jellies like under here. Oh, no, that one went away. You can almost see their stomach. So the different sections. Remember I said they have 4. So if you look at the underside, you can see how it's kind of sectioned off into 4 parts. Those are their stomachs. So we can see them from the underside, whereas for the moon jellies, we can see them from the outside as well. All right. Let's look at that picture that Cynthia had brought up that I cut her off. Aha, da-da. All right. So this is how we're going to draw, or this is a good picture to look at so we can draw our jelly. So we're going to draw the bell part at the top. It also has those sort of curves here, right? It's not straight across. And then we've got these long red tentacles and the oral arms in the middle. So let's go on over to my document camera. And I'm going to draw this one in color because it had that orange bell. So I'm going to draw my sort of half circle. And I'm going to kind of curve it in at the end, just like this. And then I'm going to draw those little wavy things. And then I'm going to draw sort of like just around. So we know that there's kind of the back side to this jelly. All right, so we've got the bell, a nice big bell for the sea nettle. And then there's some kind of lines along its body, just like we had for the moon jelly. So I'm going to give it some texture. All right, and then we can draw the oral arms. And I'm going to draw those in black because white wouldn't work on my white whiteboard. But they had those really fluffy, really long oral arms. So I'm going to make them really long and much fluffier looking than the moon jelly one. Make this one kind of go off to the side. Do one that's back here. And then one more fluffy oral arm. It's going to curve around this way. All right. So we've got the oral arm. So now our jelly can bring food up into its stomachs, but it's got to be able to sting its food. So I'm going to use a red marker. And I'm going to make really long stinging cells. Because remember those, they had really long tentacles. They're kind of wispy. But these are just going to help them catch their food. Now the stinging cells are really interesting. If we were to look under a microscope, they would look like a tiny little harpoon, like a little spear almost. And it's all wrapped up in a cell. So the way that their stinging tendrils work is there's like a little cell, a little circle, and inside is that stinger, and it's all wound up. And when something brushes it, so if a piece of food or another animal brushes up against the jelly, it disrupts or breaks that cell open, sort of like a balloon, and then something pops that balloon, and it fires that harpoon. Now, the jellies, they don't have brains, so they're not thinking, I'm going to sting this or I'm not going to sting that. And that's why you may have heard people say that we don't even want to touch jellies if they're not alive anymore because they can still sting. So if you see a jelly washed up on the beach, the best thing is to take a look at it, admire it, but not touch it. Because they can still sting even if they're not alive because all it needs is something to disrupt that cell to fire that harpoon. And you know, sometimes we do see jellies. I was at the beach last week and I had my feet in the water and I was just standing there and something brushed up against my foot and I looked down and it happened to be a moon jelly, which I know is not dangerous. It didn't hurt. I didn't touch it. I just let the water do its thing. But I found a jelly just at our local beach here over in Santa Monica. So we can find jellies anywhere in the ocean. They live along our coast. They live in all warm and cold waters. Jellies can be found everywhere. Some jellies can only be found in certain places, but we find different types of jellies all over the world's oceans. All right, so here's our nettle. And if we look at our drawing, it looks pretty good. They're twins. Awesome. They're twins. I like that. All right, so we've got two jellies drawn here. And we have a couple minutes left. And I want to talk about one more jelly. And this is a very fancy jelly. Let's bring it up, Cynthia. Ta-da! Look how fancy this jelly is. I would say most jellies are pretty fancy, but look at this one. Now, we call this one a flower hat jelly because it kind of looks like a hat and a flower. It'd be a lovely hat to wear, I think, with all these little things hanging off. But this is another type of jelly. Now, obviously, this one looks very different from the moon jelly and the nettle. What do you notice that's different about this jelly? Yeah, the color is very different. So that moon jelly had almost no color. The only time we might see some color in a moon jelly is when they eat because the food they eat is pink, and so it can turn their stomachs pink. But most of the time, they're kind of clearish or look like the moon. And then the nettle was orange and red and white. But look at this one. This jelly is blue and green. Now, it's not always blue and green. What this jelly can do is something called fluoresce. Have you heard that word before? Now, you might have heard something called bioluminescence, which kind of looks similar to this. And some animals in the ocean, they can create their own light. It's a chemical reaction in their body, and then they can glow. But some animals like this flower hat jelly, they just have pigments, or they have things in their body. When light reflects on them, it makes them glow. So it's very similar to that bioluminescence, but instead of being a chemical change in their body, it's basically when certain lights shine on them, they glow in certain colors. So if this jelly wasn't glowing, they would be kind of like a clearish color, a little bit of pink, and you'd see some greens on them, but they wouldn't be as bright blue and green as you see here. Pretty cool. Now, are you ready to draw our flower hat jelly? Let's go on over to our camera. Now, I didn't leave a lot of room to draw my flower hat jelly, but I'm going to draw it down in the bottom. But if you have more paper, you can draw it on another piece of paper. You can turn your paper over. If you don't feel like drawing a flower hat jelly, that's okay too. But I'm going to attempt to draw my flower hat jelly. So I'm going to start with a black. And I'm going to make that sort of half circle again. But I'm going to make this one a little bit sort of wider, because they kind of have more of a wide and not such a tall bell. So I'm going to make a little flower hat jelly because that's all my space can permit. I'm going to move this up a little bit. All right, so I'm going to kind of make almost like a hamburger bun is sort of what I think about. So like this. And then I'm going to kind of draw, I'm not going to draw those little waves I did the other one because we're going to kind of cover it up. I'm just going to connect it like this. And then what we're going to do is we got to add all of those little frilly things that make it those tentacles, but that have all those colors. So I'm going to draw a line so I kind of know where I'm going to draw them all. And I'm just going to draw little wiggly pieces. Now they don't all have to look the same, but I'm going to cover the bottom, and then I'm going to do some on the top of the same line, because if we take a look back in a moment at a flower hat jelly, take a look. Aha! So here is one that doesn't have that light shining on it. So it's not that fluorescent color, and this is what they look like. It looks pink and green and kind of clear. And notice these black lines, kind of pinstripes along their body. So those are all things that we can make sure we remember. But take a look. They've got these sort of wispy things, or tentacles, in all directions. So whereas we saw the moon jelly and the nettle, they were all kind of drifting below them, the flower hat jelly, it's like all over. It's like a party, because they're like a party hat, just like this. All right. So I drew some along the bottom, but I'm also going to draw some along the top like this. In all different directions, some smaller, some bigger. Going all over like it's having a party. And then I'm going to draw in those pinstripes. And the last thing I'm going to do for my flower hat is I'm going to add some color to it, because I thought it was so cool when it's fluorescing. So it's kind of green at the ends of all those tentacles. So I'm going to do a little bit of green at the end of all of them. Now, as you're drawing today, you can color your jellies any color. Even the moon jelly, you can color any color you'd like, because this is your drawing. You are the artist. So you can do whatever you'd like, color them any color, because really, those are the colors of, or these are the colors of these jellies, but bless you, jellies come in all different colors. If you walk through our aquarium, we have jellies in almost all of our galleries, and we have jellies that are clear. We have jellies that are orange and red like the nettle. We have flower hat jellies, so they're kind of blue. We have, crystal jellies, which kind of are clear, but then light reflects on them. We have something called a comb jelly, which almost looks rainbow sometimes. So it has these really fine little hairs along it, and when sun shines on those, they look like rainbows, like electric rainbows sliding down their body. We have a picture of our comb jellies. Aha! So all these little lines you see, they're moving in the water, and when light reflects on them, they kind of look like rainbows like you see here, but it's like a light show, so the rainbows are going over and over and over. And then we even have some jellies that are all blue or blue spotted. We have purple. Jellies just come in all different colors. So if you're like, oh, I want to do it pink, I want to do it purple, I want to do it blue, is that okay? 100% okay, because most likely there's a jelly in the ocean that is that color. Oh yeah, Cynthia has a video of the comb jelly. Ooh, so cool. So look, it's like it creates its own rainbows. Excellent. All right, friends, we are about out of time, so I'm going to bring my drawing over. So here are the 3 jellies we drew. We drew a moon jelly, a Pacific sea nettle, and a fancy flower hat jelly. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed drawing along with us today. Now, once again, if you want to send in your pictures, we would love to see all your drawings, and you can text it in to this number right here, or you can even email it if you're watching it a little bit later. And teachers, if you are watching, we would love to hear how many students you have joining us today. That just helps us better target our audience. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's program. We have one more program coming up at 10, and that's going to be one of our Spanish programs with Cynthia. Hope to see you then. Bye, everyone.